Let's go to the next one here, which is some stunning news that broke yesterday. Let's put it up there on the screen. Vice is said to be headed for bankruptcy. The company, once valued at $5.7 billion, is struggling to find a buyer this year, has an incredible amount of debt. The news comes immediately after they fired several people in their DC bureau and are cutting costs across the board. This is a company which raised money from Disney, which raised money from private equity. In 2017 was valued at a full 5.7, and quote, by today, most accounts, it is worth only a tiny fraction of that. In the event of bankruptcy, their largest debt holder would end up controlling the company. They said that they're operating normally, Vice is currently, and are trying to run an auction to sell the company over the next 45-day period. But clearly, they are in dire, dire financial straits. So there are only two ways that this ends. Somebody buys it for absolute pennies on the dollar. Very unlikely, actually, because they have high cost. Their burn rate is high. They've got the building in Williamsburg. They've got all of these costs in terms of shows and other contracts that they signed up for. They've got massive salaries, or had them at one point, on the books. And this is really sad to me on a personal level. BuzzFeed, I'm going to be honest, I thought it was hilarious whenever they went down. I thought it was funny with Gawker went down. Vice was, it really inspired me to get into the business. They were some of the forefront pioneers on YouTube, developing and finding stories, telling them in a way that I and many people my age and, you know, millions of people wanted to consume. I will absolutely never, ever forget watching the Vice Guide to North Korea. I'd never seen anything like it. I think that came out in 2006 or 2007. And then watching, you know, some of their Libyan stuff, Liberia.
They did like a ride-along with ISIS.
Yes,
I mean, that was
I remember that one too. The Syrian civil war coverage that they did. It was incredible. And look, I mean, there's a lot of mistakes that were made there, ideology and business on top, but it's sad. It's sad to watch it. And some great stars were born out of Vice.
It's hard to, I mean, you can't forget it. This thing was a giant. It was seen as this like sexy media upstart. Everybody was, all the traditional media outlets were like, how do we replicate this? What they're doing is astonishing. And part of the problem is the things that you're talking about that they did, or like the ISIS ride-along or whatever. No established network would do that because it's way too risky. And nor should they, honestly, because you're like really putting people's lives at risk. And so that's the sort of thing that they couldn't really scale. And so, yeah, they went down a sort of like typical like left liberal, more identity type of track in terms of their ideology. They became much less unique, and I think much less provocative, risk-taking, and, you know, it's also part of this broader shift that we're seeing where all of these outlets that were giants in the 2010s, it's over. It's just totally over. The amount of funding and cash that was being thrown at BuzzFeed and Mike and Vice and all of these companies, the valuations they were able to achieve, it was insane. And now, you know, the business, the ideology has shifted, the business models have shifted, and so whatever they were doing at that point, now that you have ad revenue specifically right now has really taken a hit, and this is part of the whole tech session conversation as well. All of these companies that were kind of struggling along, that was it for them.
There's a great documentary. I might do a monologue on this because I've never forgotten it. It came out in 2011. I watched it at the time, and I watch it probably every few years since then. It's called Page One, and it's about the New York Times and specifically their media critic, David Carr, as they're navigating the internet. At the time, this came out, again, 13 years ago now, there's a scene where Shane Smith is facing off against David Carr. And in it, David Carr was a media critic who is now dead. And Shane is basically super arrogant. He's like, we're doing what you people have never done before. Like, we're going to the places. We are the new media. You're the old media. All this stuff. And David is like, hey, we've had people in Africa since 1960. Like, shut up, basically. He tells him, shut the F up, actually. He curses in the video. And the arrogance that was exuding was correct, if you're thinking about it, in the mind of Shane Smith at the time. He's like, I'm doing stuff you guys are never going to do. I'm the new media. I'm taking over the internet, all of this. But at the end of the day, 12, 13 years later, the New York Times is frankly more profitable than ever before. They actually won. They beat Vice because they hired a lot of the people who used to work at Vice who were any good, on top of Vox and others. And now Vice is on the verge of bankruptcy. There's a story there to be told about what went wrong for so many of these companies. Fundamentally, I think it was business. I think that they got in league with the big, the HBOs and all these other people of the world. They got away from their roots. They let ideology seep in. They started building large buildings in downtown Brooklyn, which nobody asked for. Instead, they never played it safe. They tried to do a tech model of get big fast. And by doing that, they took on tech risk without any of the tech upside.
Yeah.
It turns out we're all in the same media business, which is a game of inches. You have to be brutal. You kind of have to be very risk averse, and you have to think 10, 15, 20, 100 years or so in the future.
You can't have that huge overhead of legacy media.
Yeah.
That's just you're not gonna be able to do that in the digital age. And many of these companies really bet on the social media monetization. Many of them bet originally on Facebook being huge. I mean, Facebook has moved away. First of all, Facebook is like, there's not much left content that does well there at all anymore. When it's hard to, it's easy to forget that used to be the place for Upworthy and Mike and all of this left liberal content was huge on the platform. They're moving away from politics altogether. They changed their algorithm to really screw you on monetization long ago. That took out some of these players. But I think now we're seeing also with, Twitter is moribund. It's not nearly what it used to be already. And so that is changing the underlying business dynamics as well. And Ben Smith, formerly of BuzzFeed, was talking to Ryan over on his podcast about the fact that, some of these, it's like some of these throwback players are coming back. People are looking at building out their homepage again, which is something that, this has been a long time. People are going back to Drudge Report and these news aggregators because using Twitter to surface this stuff is just not as effective anymore. And the newsletter business, obviously, with Substack, Semaphore, which has been Smith's new outlet, Puck News, right? That newsletter business, which is, again, email-based. It's this legacy technology that's been with us for a long time. That's coming back into play as well. So it's pretty wild to see the evolution that's happening in real time.
I really might do that monologue. We're going to talk to Ben Smith on Thursday. We'll probably release it sometime on the weekend just because it's going to be not in the main show. But there's a lot to be said about his book, about that era.
Yeah.
And so much of what went wrong, but also about what we can learn from them. People like you and I who are on the forefront. I don't want somebody on YouTube who's
10 years from now saying
being look at Saagar
here's
and Krystal,
the mistakes they made.
Idiots. Yeah, it's like they got arrogant.
It's a real risk.
Yeah, it is. And I think about it all the time. But I suspect that Shane was not thinking about that though. Whenever he was, yesterday, Krystal.
They were so high flying. All these people getting these $1 billion
But yesterday, Krystal, you and I, our show that's probably the biggest show we've ever done. In terms of our YouTube and on podcasts together, if you combine it. If not the biggest, maybe the second largest biggest. But we're still sitting here being like, man, you got to take it easy. You got to be careful. You got to make sure that you don't go into crazy debt to build a new studio. Everything you want to do is cash flow. These are not the decisions that they were making then at the time. So if anything, we have learned something.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now. And Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us. And if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.